The Saturday air was thick with the hum of laughter, shopping bags, and weekend chatter outside Westdale Mall until a scream tore through it. People turned. Phones lifted. On the pavement, a black teen lay face down, hands twisted behind his back, knees digging into his spine. Two officers barked orders no one could understand, their faces set, their hearts racing with something that looked more like anger than duty. The boy's backpack had spilled open, textbooks, a worn basketball, and a small FBI visitor's badge glinting under the sun. The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "He didn't do anything." Another said, "They think he stole something." The boy's eyes didn't fight. They pleaded. His breath came shallow, afraid even to move. And then, the sound. Tires screeching. Black SUVs sliding to a halt. Doors opening in unison. Men in suits stepping out, badges flashing gold in daylight. The officers froze mid-motion, hands still on the teen's back. The lead agent's voice cut through the silence. "Get your hands off my godson." The mall fell silent. No one dared breathe. Every camera trembled, still recording. Because in that frozen moment, America saw something raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. For a few seconds, time itself refused to move. The word Godson echoed through the open air like thunder inside a cathedral. The officer's hands lifted from the boy's back, slow, uncertain, afraid of what they didn't yet understand. The teen's chest rose sharply as oxygen finally returned to his lungs. The lead agent stepped forward, tall, dark suit, expression unreadable, but his eyes were pure fire. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Authority hung on him like armor. The crowd, moments ago wild with shouts and accusations, now stood quiet, stunned by a reality that had flipped in seconds. The agent crouched beside the teen, his voice low but steady. "You're safe now, Jaden. 17 years old. High school senior. Honor student. Captain of the debate team. That morning, he'd simply taken a bus to the mall to pick up a new pair of sneakers with the money he'd earned tutoring younger kids in math. He had no idea his life would become a headline before noon. The officers tried to recover their composure, muttering something about suspected theft. Their radios crackled, the sound of backup they no longer needed, or perhaps no longer wanted. The agent turned, eyes cutting through both of them like glass. Suspected based on what? He asked, his tone calm, but the calm of a storm about to break. No answer came. The senior officer swallowed, his jaw tightening. He matched a description. The crowd murmured again. Phones were still filming. 10 different angles, 10 different truths, soon to flood the internet. The agent rose to his full height, straightening his jacket, eyes never leaving the two men. "You just tackled an unarmed minor, outside a public mall, without cause, and you're about to find out exactly who you laid hands on." He pulled a phone from his pocket, murmured a few words, and within moments, more agents began stepping out of the SUVs. Some cordoned off the area. Others began asking witnesses for statements. The officers, realizing the weight of what they'd done, looked smaller with every passing second. Jaden sat up slowly, still trembling. His face carried the quiet disbelief of someone who hadn't yet processed that he'd survived something meant to destroy his dignity. His wrist bore a red mark from the handcuff that had never fully closed. A woman from the crowd stepped forward, middle-aged, tears on her cheeks. "I saw everything," she said. "He didn't do anything wrong. They just grabbed him. Said he looked like someone who ran from a store." The agent nodded gently. "Thank you, ma'am. We'll need your statement." Jaden glanced up, confused. His voice shook. "Uncle Marcus? What's happening?" Marcus Hale, special agent in charge, FBI Civil Rights Division, looked down at his godson. "What's happening?" he said quietly. "Is that they just made a mistake they can't erase." The mall's security guards arrived, sweating, nervous, unsure whose side to stand on. But the agents had already taken over. Traffic halted outside. Within minutes, the story would travel across social media. Videos already titled "Police Tackle Teen, Then This Happens." Jaden sat on the curb as an agent offered him water. He took it, hands trembling, trying to hide the tears that stung his eyes. "I didn't even talk back," he said softly. "I just asked what I did wrong." Marcus looked at him with that mix of pride and sorrow only someone who's seen too much can hold. "You didn't do anything wrong, Jayden. You were just born in the wrong skin for their comfort." He said it quietly, but everyone nearby heard. A few nodded. Others looked away. Inside one of the police cruisers, the officers sat in silence. Their radios buzzed with distant chatter about media arriving and command requests. They didn't dare step out. Not now. Not after realizing that the boy they had tackled had been under federal protection. Not because of his godfather's title, but because of what he represented. Jayden had spent the summer interning at the FBI's Youth Program on Law and Justice Reform, the very institution meant to rebuild trust between law, enforcement, and black communities. He had written an essay just weeks earlier titled, "What Justice Looks Like When Everyone Wears the Same Fear." Now, his words were playing out before him in the most brutal way imaginable. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "You've got a choice, Jayden. You can let this be just another video, or you can make it something no one forgets." Jayden looked up. His eyes clearer now, something steady burning inside them. "Then let's make it matter," Marcus nodded once. The cameras kept rolling, but what they didn't see, what they couldn't record, was the shift that happened in that moment. The fear that had once lived in Jayden's eyes was gone, replaced by something stronger. Purpose. The same crowd that had watched in horror now watched with hope. They didn't know what would come next, but they knew they'd just witnessed the beginning of something larger than one mall, one city, or one mistake. And as the SUVs rolled away and the flashing lights dimmed, Jayden stared out the window, already realizing that justice wasn't a place you reached. It was something you had to fight to keep from slipping away again. The drive from the mall to the federal field office was silent. Jayden stared out the tinted window, watching his reflection blur against the passing world. Police cruisers fading into distance, people pointing their phones, the flashing lights now just ghosts behind him. His hands still trembled, though he tried to steady them. The imprint of the officer's grip lingered on his wrist, like a scar carved in seconds. Agent Marcus Hale sat beside him, jaw tight, phone buzzing every few minutes. Calls from Washington, from the Bureau's Civil Rights Division, from media liaisons already asking for statements. "Don't say a word yet," Marcus finally said. "They'll twist whatever you say until it fits the version they want to sell." Jayden nodded faintly. "Do they always get away with it?" he asked, almost whispering. Marcus's eyes stayed on the road ahead. "Sometimes," he said, "but not this time." At the field office, Jayden was greeted by an unexpected mix of faces, agents, analysts, and even 2 lawyers from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights section. They treated him not like a victim, but like someone whose experience now carried weight. A camera crew was already setting up outside the lobby doors. The footage had exploded online. Millions of views within hours. Hashtags, outrage. Some calling for justice, others defending the police. A cable network ran the headline, "FBI agent's godson assaulted by local officers." Marcus stood behind a conference table littered with reports. "We're not chasing revenge," he told his team. "We're chasing accountability." The 2 officers involved had been placed on immediate leave pending investigation. But in the digital age, punishment wasn't just internal, it was public. Their names had already leaked. Their past complaints were surfacing. One had 6 excessive force allegations, all dismissed. The other had transferred 3 times in 5 years. Jayden sat quietly in the corner, watching the swirl of bureaucracy and emotion collide. He'd gone from student to symbol overnight. Reporters were calling his school. His friends' phones were buzzing. The principal had left a message. "We stand with you, Jayden, but please be careful what you post." He didn't plan to post anything. Not yet. He wasn't ready for his voice to be another noise in a storm of opinions. He wanted the truth to stand on its own. Later that evening, Marcus took him into a quiet office. On the wall hung a framed quote. "The truth will not protect you if silence protects the lie." "Your name's out there now," Marcus said, "and people are going to try to use you for their politics, their ratings, their agendas. You can either let that happen, Or control the story yourself? Jayden took a deep breath. How do you control something like this? You start by speaking, Marcus replied. But not to the cameras. To the people who'll listen. That night, Jayden sat at a desk staring at a blank screen. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Then he began to type, not as a victim, but as a witness. He wrote about what it felt like to be tackled for breathing in the wrong skin, about how fear didn't start when they yelled, "Get down!" It started years earlier, every time he crossed the street when a patrol car slowed near him. He wrote that he didn't hate the officers. He hated the system that made them see a threat in every reflection darker than theirs. By morning, his post had gone viral. Millions read his words. Teachers, students, activists, and parents. The comments flooded in. This broke me. My son's the same age. We're with you, Jayden. But not everyone supported him. Anonymous messages appeared, some filled with hate, others with warnings. Stay quiet. You're exaggerating. He matched a description. Marcus expected the backlash. They always find a way to shift blame, he told Jayden. The moment a black man tells the truth, they call it anger. The moment he stays calm, they call it guilt. A week later, the official investigation began. The footage from the mall was analyzed frame by frame. Audio from nearby security cameras revealed the officer's conversation seconds before the takedown. One saying, "He looks like the guy from the store," the other replying. Doesn't matter, he ran, but Jayden hadn't run. He had simply reached for his phone. That single misunderstanding, or assumption, had triggered everything. The news networks debated endlessly. Legal experts, police unions, civil rights leaders. Everyone had an opinion. But few had the courage to admit the truth. Sometimes the system wasn't broken. It was built this way. Jayden found himself invited to speak at a youth summit organized by civil rights advocates. Marcus hesitated at first, but he could see Jayden's determination. "You sure you're ready?" he asked. "I have to be," Jayden said. "If I don't talk about it, someone else will. And they'll tell it wrong." At the summit, under bright lights and a crowd of hundreds, Jayden took the stage. His voice wavered at first, but soon steadied as he spoke. "They didn't see a student," he said. "They didn't see someone with dreams. They saw what they've been trained to fear. And the scariest part, they didn't even question why." The audience was silent. Some cried. Others stood in quiet solidarity. It wasn't a speech of anger. It was a plea for understanding, for humanity. When he stepped down, Marcus met him backstage. "You just changed something," he said, but the change didn't come without consequence. That night, threats escalated. Social media posts appeared with Jayden's address partially visible. A brick shattered the window of his mother's car. Police promised heightened patrols, but Jayden couldn't help feeling the same fear return. Only now, it came from both sides. Marcus tightened protection. 2 agents were assigned near his home. News trucks parked down the street. The world wanted to know what the young man would do next. Then, a development no one saw coming, one of the officers involved requested a meeting. Off the record, through his lawyer. Marcus debated it for days, but eventually agreed under supervision. Jayden sat across from the officer in a small room, the air thick with tension. The man's uniform was gone. He looked smaller without it, human even. "I was wrong," the officer said, eyes lowered. "I didn't see you. I saw someone I was taught to fear." For the first time, Jayden felt something unexpected. Not relief, but sadness. Because the man across from him wasn't a monster. He was proof that racism didn't always wear a mask of hate. Sometimes it wore ignorance dressed as instinct. Marcus watched in silence. Later, as they left the room, Jayden said quietly, "If he can admit it." "Maybe others can too," Marcus nodded. "Maybe. But only if the world keeps watching." That night, Jayden stood at his window, city lights stretching out like a constellation of unfinished stories. He realized something deeper. Justice wasn't only about punishment. It was about prevention. The video had shown the world what happened when fear was left unchecked. Now, he had a chance to show what could happen when courage took its place. And though the weight of what he carried felt unbearable, he understood it now. He wasn't just a boy who survived. He was becoming the voice for those who hadn't. The morning of the public hearing arrived like a storm disguised as calm. Outside the city courthouse, news vans lined the street like metal vultures, their satellite dishes pointed at the sky. Reporters rehearsed lines, cameras blinked red, and every lens waited for the same face, Jayden's. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with restrained chaos. Federal officials, journalists, community leaders, all packed into a space meant for quiet proceedings, but now trembling with tension. The case wasn't technically a trial yet. It was an oversight hearing to review the officer's conduct and systemic issues behind the incident. But everyone knew it was bigger than that. It was about what America saw in those few brutal seconds of footage. Jayden sat beside Marcus wearing a simple gray suit. He looked older now, not in age but in gravity, the kind of maturity forced by trauma. The cameras had turned him into a symbol, but he wasn't here for fame. He was here for clarity. Across the aisle sat the two officers. Their lawyer whispered in low tones, avoiding eye contact. The younger one, the one who'd held Jayden down, stared at the table, his jaw clenched, his fingers tapping nervously. The other shifted uneasily, the weight of the moment pressing down. The committee chair began. Today we review an incident that captured national attention. The detainment of 17-year-old Jayden Carter outside Westdale Mall. Her voice was steady but cold, the tone of someone walking a political tightrope. We are here to determine whether racial bias influenced the officer's actions and what systemic measures must change to prevent such occurrences in the future. Videos played on the large screen. The same. Footage millions had seen online. The crowd went silent as the image of Jayden being tackled flickered to life. The sound of the officer shouting echoed through the room. Then, the moment the black SUVs arrived, and the frozen look on the officers' faces. Jayden's hands trembled slightly, but Marcus placed his hand gently on his shoulder. "Breathe," he whispered. When Jayden was called to testify, he rose slowly. Every camera turned toward him. He adjusted the microphone. "My name is Jayden Carter," he began, his voice calm but firm. "And what happened to me that day wasn't just about me. It was about what too many people go through and don't survive to talk about." He told them everything. The suddenness of the takedown, the fear, the humiliation. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried their own gravity. "I didn't resist," he said quietly. "I didn't even understand what was happening. I kept thinking, if I move wrong, I might not make it home. I remember the officer's knee in my back, and I remember wondering how many others had felt the same pressure and never gotten up." Murmurs filled the room. The committee chair tried to maintain order. When the officer was asked to respond, his lawyer encouraged silence. But something in the man broke. He leaned toward the mic. "I made a mistake," he said. "I thought I was doing my job. But I didn't question what that job had taught me to fear." Gasps rippled through the audience. Even Marcus raised his eyebrows. It wasn't a confession of guilt, but it was an admission of something rarely spoken in public rooms like this. Conditioning. The hearing went on for hours. Experts, psychologists, activists all weighing in. One speaker, a retired police chief, summed it up sharply. When fear becomes part of training, humanity becomes collateral damage. As the hearing concluded, Jayden's name began trending again, not because of outrage this time, but because of hope. People called his testimony the calm that cut through chaos. Civil rights groups began pushing for what they called Jayden's Law, a federal mandate requiring bias de-escalation, training and public transparency for officer misconduct, records. But the day wasn't over. As Jayden and Marcus left the courthouse, flashes from cameras blinded them. Reporters shouted questions. "Jayden, do you forgive them?" one asked. He paused on the steps, sunlight glinting off the marble beneath his shoes. The crowd waited for something sensational. Anger, defiance, outrage. But what came instead was quiet conviction. "I don't forgive what happened," Jayden said. "But I forgive the person, because if I don't, I become what broke me. And I can't let that happen." The silence that followed was heavier than applause. It was the kind of silence that makes people think instead of react. That night, the clip went viral. Millions watched him say those words. Editorials called it a moment of grace. Others criticized it as too soft. But Jayden didn't care what they called it. He hadn't said it for them. He'd said it for himself, to close the wound that others kept trying to reopen. Meanwhile, Marcus worked late at the field office. Calls poured in, from senators, advocacy groups, even law enforcement officials wanting to understand how to prevent another Jayden Carter incident. He looked at the flood of emails and realized something powerful. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was policy waiting to be written. Later that week, Jayden received a handwritten letter. No sender name, just a folded note slipped under his door. I watched you that day. You showed more strength in silence than I ever did in uniform. You made me remember why I joined in the first place, to protect, not to presume. I'm leaving the force tomorrow. I hope that's a start. Jayden read it twice, then folded it carefully. Placing it inside the notebook where he'd written his essay months earlier, he whispered to himself, maybe it's working, but deep down he knew it wasn't over. Change never arrived with applause. It arrived with resistance, with struggle, with exhaustion. And he was ready to face all of it. As the city lights flickered beyond his window that night, Jayden looked at his reflection and saw not just a boy, but the beginning of something. A movement shaped not by hate or anger, but by the unrelenting demand to be seen as human. The world had watched him fall. Now they were watching him rise. Weeks passed, but the world didn't move on the way it usually did. For once, a story involving a black teenager didn't fade beneath the next scandal or distraction. It stayed, replayed, discussed, analyzed in classrooms, churches, and dinner tables across the country. Jayden Carter's name had become more than a headline. It had become a conversation, one that refused to end quietly. His essay was now being taught in community programs on bias awareness. Universities invited him to speak. High school students wrote letters describing how his story changed the way they viewed authority. But Jayden didn't see himself as a hero. Heroes fixed things. He was still trying to understand how something so wrong could happen so easily, and to someone doing everything right. One morning, Marcus called him into the office. "Sit down," he said with a rare smile. "You might want to see this." He turned his laptop around. On the screen, a Senate committee had just passed the first reading of the Jayden Carter Act, a bipartisan bill mandating racial bias retraining for all federal and local law enforcement, along with public access to disciplinary records. The caption read, "From tragedy to transformation, youth testimony sparks nationwide reform." Jayden's breath caught. They actually did it? Marcus nodded. They actually did it. For the first time in months, Jayden felt a weight lift, not entirely, but enough to breathe differently. Change wasn't complete, but it had begun. Later that afternoon, he visited the community center where he used to tutor kids. The walls were plastered with posters of athletes, scientists, and now, unexpectedly, a photo of him standing on the courthouse steps. Underneath, someone had written in black marker, "Courage isn't loud. It's consistent." He laughed softly, shaking his head. The kids rushed up full of questions. "Is it true you met the president?" one asked. "Did you really forgive the cop?" another whispered. Jayden smiled. "Yeah," he said. "Both are true. But forgiveness isn't saying it's okay. It's saying I won't let it own me anymore." The room fell quiet. Even the younger ones understood in their own way. Outside, a mural was being painted on the community center's wall, a giant portrait of Jayden kneeling, not as a victim, but as someone standing in defiance of gravity itself. Around him were painted words in bold letters, "See me, hear me, change with me." Meanwhile, the two officers had faced their hearings. One resigned voluntarily. The other chose to enter the department's retraining program, one that would soon become mandatory nationwide. Neither of them had spoken publicly again. Jayden didn't seek vengeance. He sought perspective, and sometimes that hurt more than revenge ever could. Months later, Jayden sat at the Lincoln Memorial, watching tourists take photos by the reflecting pool. Marcus joined him, coffee in hand. You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been there that day? He asked quietly. Jayden nodded. Every night, Marcus studied him. And what do you think? Jayden took a long breath, eyes fixed on the water. I think the world would have lost another name to a hashtag, and no one would have asked why it keeps happening. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that carries both gratitude and grief, the twin truths of survival. Uncle Marcus, Jayden said finally, you think this will really change anything? Marcus smiled faintly. Change doesn't come like lightning, Jayden. It comes like sunrise, slow, steady, and impossible to stop once it begins. That night, Jayden returned home and opened his journal again, the same one where he'd written his first essay months ago. He wrote, They tried to take my dignity, but all they did was prove its worth. I didn't win against them. I reminded them they could still lose their humanity if they stopped seeing mine. He closed the book, placed it on his shelf beside the badge Marcus had given him on his 17th birthday, not as a symbol of law, but of accountability. In the months that followed, Jayden continued to speak at schools, correctional academies, and community forums. Some crowds were warm, others tense. But he never changed his message. Racism isn't always a word. Sometimes it's a reflex. And if we don't challenge it, it becomes policy. 1 year later, he stood on a small stage at a national youth summit, the same event where he had first found his voice. Behind him, a banner read, From Witness to Movement. I'm not here to tell you I'm special, he told the crowd. I'm here to tell you I'm not. And that's why this matters, because if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. The difference is what we choose to do after. The applause that followed wasn't loud or chaotic. It was deep, sustained, the kind of applause that meant people understood. As he stepped off stage, a young white boy approached him, no older than 12, wearing a small police cadet cap. Mr. Jayden, he said nervously, my dad's a cop. We watched your video together. He said you were right. He said he's trying to do better. Jayden smiled, his throat tightening. Tell him thank you, he said softly. That's how it starts. That evening, walking home through the city, he passed the same mall where it all began. The crowd was gone, the noise replaced by quiet hums of life returning to normal. But something felt different. The space wasn't haunted anymore. It was reclaimed. He stopped by the spot where he'd been tackled. There was no stain, no mark, no trace. Just a small plaque someone had nailed into the ground. It read, On this ground, injustice fell, and humanity stood up. Jayden smiled. The sun was setting. Not in darkness, but in gold. A reflection of what Marcus had said. Change comes like sunrise. As he walked away, the wind carried the faint sound of traffic, laughter, and music from a nearby cafe. The world moved on, but this time it moved forward. And somewhere between memory and redemption, a 17-year-old boy who once lay face down on the pavement had become a mirror for a nation still learning to look at itself honestly. Because sometimes, one story doesn't just reveal what went wrong, it reminds everyone what could still be right.